You spend years working on an idea, pouring your heart into it, and trusting the one person you've known since day one. But then in the blink of an eye, that person, your best friend, takes it all from you. They steal your business plan, your future, and turn it into their own. You could confront them, fight back, or let it go. But what if you had the chance to perfect what was stolen, to turn the tables in a way they never saw coming? What if the best revenge wasn't in taking them down? It was in building something they could never touch. I'm Michael Donovan. And this is the story of how I took back what was mine and turned a betrayal into the biggest win of my life. It was supposed to be the breakthrough, the idea that would change everything for both of us. We had been inseparable since college, partners in crime, dreamers, always talking about how we'd make it big. My best friend Kyle and I, we were supposed to take on the world together. We even talked about how we'd split everything evenly, 50-50. We'd share the wins and the losses. At least, that's what I thought. But somewhere along the line, something shifted. Maybe it was the stress of starting a business. Maybe it was the pressure. Or maybe Kyle had always been playing the long game while I was too naive to see it. I had been working on this idea for months, planning, writing, researching, putting every ounce of energy into making it a reality. I was so close to presenting it. I could already picture the pitch, the investors, the excitement in their eyes. I had it all figured out. The market was ripe for something like this, and it was my idea, my vision. And then, without warning, it all crumbled. Kyle came to me one night looking like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was different, quieter than usual. He told me he had an idea, something he wanted to run by me. "I've been thinking," he said, "about a way to take this to the next level. Something revolutionary." I should have seen the warning signs. He had always been the one who liked to talk big, the one who could sell ice to an Eskimo. But that night, it was different. There was a glint in his eyes, a calculated look that I hadn't seen before. He pitched the idea to me, and for a split second, I thought I was hearing my own words. The same plan, the same structure, the same everything. It was mine, my business plan. But Kyle wasn't just talking. He wasn't just brainstorming. He was stealing it. He didn't need to say anything more. The truth was written all over his face. I had given him everything, my hard work, my ideas, the blueprint of my future, and he had taken it, polished it up, and passed it off as his own. I froze. Anger washed over me, but I held it in. I couldn't let him know I knew. Not yet. I needed to see what he would do with it. And maybe, just maybe, I was underestimating myself. Maybe I had something more to bring to the table than he thought. I smiled, nodded, told him it sounded good. I agreed to help him perfect it. But in the back of my mind, something was shifting. I didn't care that he had stolen my plan. What mattered now was how I was going to take it back, how I was going to use his betrayal as fuel to build something bigger, better, and more successful than he could ever dream of. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I was going to make sure he'd never catch up. I watched Kyle for weeks, keeping up the act, pretending like nothing had changed. It was all so close to me, so personal, that the idea of confronting him head-on felt like a stupid move. I knew he wasn't going to back down. He was too proud, too cocky. But I had something Kyle didn't have: patience, determination, and a real drive to perfect what he'd stolen. I started working late, staying in the office long after he left, poring over every detail of my original plan. I didn't just want to make it better, I wanted to bury him with it. If he thought he could take my idea and run with it, he was in for a rude awakening. I was going to turn my stolen vision into something so polished, so meticulously fine-tuned, that he'd never be able to catch up. I started digging into the details he never bothered to look at, the marketing angles, the potential partnerships, the customer experience. Kyle had been all flash, all surface, just selling the idea without any of the depth or grit that actually made it work. And that was where I would leave him in the dust. He had taken the skeleton, but I was going to flesh it out, create something that was whole, something that couldn't be replicated. There were late nights at my desk, running numbers, tweaking strategies, and refining every piece of the plan. It felt like a personal challenge, a silent war I was waging with my best friend. I wasn't just going to prove him wrong, I was going to prove to myself that I was the one with the vision all along. Kyle was good at pretending to be brilliant, but I knew he lacked the heart and the drive that came from real passion. I didn't tell anyone about what was going on. I kept everything to myself, watching from the sidelines as Kyle went through the motions of pretending to be the big shot. The investors, the presentations, the pitch meetings, I could see them buying into his act, eating up the surface-level stuff, just as I had once done. But I knew it was only a matter of time before his lack of substance caught up to him. Then came the day that everything shifted. The day I knew I had him. I was sitting in a coffee shop, scrolling through the latest business trends, when I saw it, the headline that made my blood run cold. Kyle's company, his version of my plan, had just secured major funding. He had gone ahead and pitched it to a group of investors that I had targeted months ago. The deal was already signed, the announcement was out. I couldn't believe it. In that moment, I wanted to throw my phone across the room. He had done it. He'd pulled it off, just like I knew he would. And in the blink of an eye, he had all the attention, all the credibility, but I didn't panic. I wasn't going to let this be the end of it. This was just the beginning. Kyle might have secured the funding, but he was still playing with a half-baked idea. He didn't know how to refine it. He didn't know how to perfect it. That was where I came in. I spent the next few days diving deep into what he had presented, analyzing the weaknesses, looking at the places where he had faltered. It wasn't a flawless pitch, despite what the investors thought. There were cracks in the foundation, opportunities he had missed, gaps that no one else had bothered to see. While Kyle sat back, enjoying his newfound success, I was working harder than ever. I wasn't just going to improve my plan, I was going to make it bulletproof. I was going to create the kind of business that Kyle could never replicate. I would refine the customer experience, optimize the logistics, and nail down every detail to perfection. Kyle might have taken the first step, but I was going to take the giant leap forward. The pressure was on, but I welcomed it. This was my chance to show him, and everyone else, that the real genius behind this idea wasn't in the flashy pitch or the surface-level appeal. It was in the details, and I knew the details better than anyone. I was no longer the guy in the shadows. I wasn't just the friend he had stolen from. I was about to build something so solid, so irrefutable, that he wouldn't know what hit him. Kyle had made his move, but I was playing the long game. And when I came out on top, it wouldn't just be about the business, it would be about the power shift. It would be about showing him that no matter how far ahead he thought he was, I could always catch up. And I could always beat him. The days blurred together, but I kept grinding. Every spare moment was spent refining my plan. I knew Kyle was sitting pretty, soaking up the praise, thinking he had it all figured out. But every time I saw a post of his online or heard another congratulatory remark from one of our mutual friends, something inside me burned hotter. He didn't know what was coming. I wasn't out to destroy him, at least not in the way he might have thought. I wasn't looking for a public confrontation. What I was building was something subtle, something that would hit him when he least expected it. Kyle had his funding, but I had time to perfect, to improve, to outmaneuver him at every turn. I started approaching the problem differently, focusing on the areas Kyle had ignored. I wasn't going to rely on the surface-level success he had stumbled into. I knew that what door I created would be bulletproof, something that would gain not only traction, but loyalty, a customer base that would stick with me no matter what. I dug into behavioral research, studied consumer trends, and consulted experts in areas he hadn't even considered. While Kyle spent his time basking in the glow of the investor's attention, I spent mine outpacing him at every step. I wasn't trying to replicate what he'd done. I was going to outshine him with something he would never see coming. Then came the first opportunity to make my move. A few months in, I saw an opening. Kyle's company had released its first product. It was decent, a good start, but it was flawed. I knew exactly where it would fall short. Kyle had rushed it. He had focused on speed, on hitting the market before anyone else, without considering how customers would actually experience the product. His launch wasn't terrible, but it wasn't sustainable. The product was already getting mixed reviews. I didn't hesitate. I went to work. I hired the best product designers, met with engineers who were already ahead of the curve, and refined the features Kyle had overlooked. I made sure everything would not only be functional, but also irresistible to the user. While his product was on the shelves, mine was being fine-tuned to perfection, and I knew that the moment mine hit the market, it would eclipse his. But I needed more than just a better product. I needed a story. I needed to create a narrative that would pull people in, one that made them feel like they weren't just buying a product, but investing in a vision. I poured hours into creating an emotional connection, a brand that was about more than just business. It was about people. I made sure every detail was aligned, the customer experience, the messaging, the brand tone. Every touch point was intentional, down to the way we responded to customer feedback. We weren't just building a product, we were building a community. And as I sat back and watched Kyle's team struggle with the initial feedback on his launch, I knew my time was coming. I had kept my cards close to my chest, knowing that once I released my product, once I launched my vision, Kyle would have no chance. He had rushed to the finish line while I was taking my time, carefully crafting something that would leave him in the dust. Then came the day of the official launch for my business. I had been waiting for this moment for months, fine-tuning every aspect of the presentation. The marketing campaign was ready, the influencers were on board, and the investors had already started showing interest in the buzz my brand was generating. I released it with a quiet confidence, knowing that the competition was about to get ugly for Kyle. The result? The response was overwhelming. My product was received with open arms, the reviews were glowing, and the sales skyrocketed within days. It was clear people had been waiting for something different, something better. And I had given it to them, but what stung the most for Kyle wasn't the sales figures, it was the customer feedback. My product was superior. It didn't just solve problems, it delighted people. It connected with them on a deeper level. Kyle had built something good, but it wasn't enough. He had missed the mark. And now he was watching my product dominate in every way his couldn't. It was bittersweet, seeing the recognition, the praise rolling in, knowing it was everything I had worked for. But it wasn't just the success that felt sweet. It was the knowledge that I had taken back what was mine, turned it into something better, and made sure Kyle would never catch up. I didn't need to rub it in his face. The numbers spoke for themselves, the reviews spoke for themselves. And the market? The market was already moving in my direction, leaving him behind. I'd perfected my plan, my vision, and I had built something far beyond his grasp. And I wasn't done yet. The weeks that followed felt like I was living in a parallel universe. I had become a force in the market, a rising star that Kyle had never expected to see. His company, despite its initial hype, was starting to falter. The cracks were showing, the flaws in his rushed product becoming more apparent every day. But the thing that stung Kyle the most wasn't the decline in sales or the complaints. No, it was the way people were talking about us. Or rather, the way they were talking about me. It wasn't just the product, it was the brand. People were connecting with it. They weren't just buying a solution, they were buying into the story I'd crafted. My product wasn't just filling a gap in the market. It was making people feel seen, heard, understood. I had tapped into something deeper, something that Kyle would never have considered. And it was that emotional connection, that authenticity, that was leaving his business in the dust. I could see the frustration in his eyes when we ran into each other at an industry event. He was pretending to be cool, pretending that everything was still going according to plan, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. The talk was all about my launch, my success, and even though Kyle was still pretending to hold his ground, I knew it bothered him. He tried to smile, tried to keep the conversation light, but I could tell he was struggling. "You've done well," he said, his words forced, as if he was trying to convince both of us. "Thanks, man," I replied, keeping my tone casual, though every word was laced with the satisfaction of knowing I had outplayed him. I could see him searching for the right thing to say, trying to regain some control of the situation, but deep down, I knew I had already won. The market had spoken, and it wasn't speaking to him. "I guess you had the right idea after all," he said after a moment, his voice a little quieter now. "You really took it to the next level." I leaned in, not bothering to hide the edge, in my tone. "I didn't just take it to the next level, Kyle. I made it what it was always supposed to be. You couldn't see that, but I did." The words hung in the air between us. I wasn't trying to humiliate him, not in front of everyone anyway. But the truth was out. He had stolen from me, taken my idea, and tried to pass it off as his own. And now, watching him struggle, I realized something I hadn't fully accepted. Before, this wasn't just about business. This was about something deeper. It was about trust, about betrayal, about taking something so personal, something I had poured my soul into, and watching him destroy it for his own gain. He didn't say anything after that. He didn't have to. His silence spoke volumes. And in that moment, I knew that I hadn't just built a successful business. I had built something even more important. I had reclaimed my integrity. I had taken back what was mine, not by fighting him head on, but by making something so powerful, so undeniable that he couldn't touch it. The next few weeks were more of the same, his company floundering, my product continuing to soar. I started getting invitations to speak at conferences, to share my story with the world. And through it all, Kyle's presence faded into the background. People had moved on. They were looking at me, at what I had built, and for the first time, in a long time, I realized that this victory wasn't just about the success of my business. It was about something deeper, about finally taking control of my own narrative. I knew I had beaten him, but I also knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I wasn't done perfecting my vision, and I wasn't done showing the world that I could not only rise above betrayal, I could thrive because of it. And as I stood on stage at the next industry event, the spotlight shining on me, I couldn't help but think back to that moment when I first realized Kyle had taken my business plan. I had been angry, hurt, betrayed, but now I saw it for what it really was, the catalyst I needed to become who I was meant to be. I wasn't just the guy who had his idea stolen anymore. I was the guy who had perfected it, made it his own, and built an empire because of it. Kyle might have started this, but I was finishing it. And there was nothing he could do to stop me now. By now, Kyle's company was in full-blown crisis mode. The market was moving away from his product, and the pressure was mounting. News outlets were starting to pick up on the decline, comparing his offering to mine, highlighting the stark differences in both quality and user experience. Investors, once so eager to back him, were quietly distancing themselves. The investors who had believed in his idea now had their sights on me, not just because of my product, but because of the company I had built around it. The foundation was strong, the structure was solid, and the people believed in it. They were buying into the long-term vision, not the quick win. Meanwhile, Kyle was scrambling. He'd put all his energy into getting attention, securing his funding, and creating hype, but when it came to execution, he had come up short. It was painful to watch from a distance, but I couldn't afford to feel pity. The truth was, this wasn't about winning some petty rivalry. This was about proving to myself that I could take what had been taken from me and make it better, stronger. And every setback Kyle faced only made my position stronger. One afternoon, I received an email from one of his investors. It was an invitation to discuss potential partnership opportunities. The subject line was clear: exploring new options. After recent performance review, it didn't take a genius to read between the lines. His investors were already exploring their options, looking for a way out before they sunk any further into a sinking ship. I knew the game was changing, but what surprised me more wasn't the email. It was the message Kyle left on my phone later that night. His voice was raw, tense. He had clearly been drinking. "Hey, man," he began, his voice wavering. I need to talk to you. I screwed up, all right? I get it. But look, can we just call it even? Can we make this right? You've got what you wanted. You've got the product, the attention, but I'm drowning here and I need help. Please. I felt the surge of anger again, the familiar taste of betrayal, but this time it was different. It wasn't just his mistake. It was mine too. I had let him steal my idea, and I had let myself believe I needed to stay in the background, that I couldn't fight back. But now, I had everything I needed. I had the plan, the resources, and the vision. I didn't need to help him. I let the voicemail sit for a while, listening to his desperation. And for the first time, I felt no sympathy. Kyle had always been the one to manipulate, to charm, to talk his way out of any situation. But this time, I wasn't buying it. He wanted me to save him, to fix the mess he had made, but I had already done that for myself. I deleted the message without responding. There was nothing left to say. The following week, everything came to a head. Kyle's company officially announced they were reworking their product, a soft attempt to rebrand and make up for the catastrophic first launch. But the damage was done, their credibility was gone, and there was no turning back. The headlines were brutal. In contrast, my brand continued to rise. We had secured more partnerships, expanded our reach, and I was already strategizing for the next phase of growth. The market was taking notice and competitors were starting to feel the pressure. My product had proven itself, and now it was time to turn the vision into something bigger, something global. But despite the overwhelming success, there was still a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Kyle's face still lingered in my mind. He had been my best friend, the one person who had been with me through thick and thin. But when it came down to it, he didn't just steal my business plan, he stole my trust. And that was something I would never get back. It was the moment I truly realized that business wasn't just about making money. It wasn't just about creating something that worked or succeeding for the sake of success. It was about integrity, about staying true to yourself when everything around you is trying to pull you down. Kyle's failure wasn't just his, it was a reflection of the path he chose to take. The easy way, the shortcut. And I wasn't willing to compromise who I was for any of it. The final nail in the coffin came when Kyle's company was officially acquired by a larger competitor, an offer he had no choice but to accept. His investors had pulled the plug, and the deal was a last-ditch attempt to salvage something before the company collapsed entirely. I heard the news through an industry contact and it felt surreal, but there was no sense of victory in the moment, no joy in watching him fail. The satisfaction came not from the fall of his business, but from the realization that I had outgrown him. I had built something that could stand on its own, something that had depth, that had heart. And it wasn't just the success of the business that felt rewarding. It was knowing that I had taken back what was mine. Kyle had stolen my business plan, but I had perfected it. And in the process, I had found something more valuable, my own strength. And that was the real victory. As I stood on stage at the next industry event, announcing my next big move, I couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity. The world had finally seen me for what I was. Not just the guy who had been wronged, but the guy who had built something from scratch, who had risen above betrayal and turned it into a triumph. And as the applause echoed in the room, I realized something else too. Kyle may have thought he had the upper hand, but I was the one who truly held the power all along. I had the vision, the determination, and the integrity to succeed. And that was something he could never steal from me. Section 6 months passed, and the dust from the competition with Kyle finally began to settle. My company was thriving, expanding in ways I hadn't even imagined at the start. The dream I had once shared with Kyle, the one we'd built together in college as two ambitious young men, had become a reality for me. I wasn't just a business owner. I was a force to be reckoned with. But even as I stood on top, there was no overwhelming sense of triumph. It was quiet, peaceful even. The constant pressure I'd been under was gone, replaced with the satisfaction of knowing I'd built something real. And in some strange way, it felt more fulfilling than any of the accolades or awards I had received. It was the quiet victories, the ones that didn't need to be shouted about, that carried the most weight. I'd received calls from investors wanting to get in on the next phase, competitors scrambling to catch up, and former colleagues who now wanted to be part of my journey. But the biggest call came on a cold, rainy afternoon when Kyle finally reached out again. His voice was hoarse when he left the message, but there was something different in the way he spoke. "I know we haven't talked in a while," his voice cracked, "but I need to apologize for everything, for what I did, for how I treated you. I was selfish, and I didn't think about the consequences. I get it now. I was wrong. It was an honest apology, but it didn't change anything." The wounds had healed in a way I never thought they would. In the beginning, I wanted to confront him, to make him see the damage he'd done. But time had given me something even more valuable: perspective. His betrayal had pushed me to a place I never would have gone on my own. I had found the strength I didn't know I had. So I didn't respond right away. I let the voicemail sit there, not out of spite, but because I had learned something in the process. I didn't need Kyle's apology to move forward. I didn't need his validation or his acknowledgement of what he'd done. What mattered now was how far I'd come on my own. I called back a few days later, and when he picked up, I spoke simply. "Thanks for the apology, Kyle. I appreciate it. But I think we've both moved on in different ways. You'll be fine. I'll be fine, and we don't need to revisit the past anymore." There was a long silence on the other end. And for the first time, I felt like Kyle truly understood. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. What had happened was in the past, and I had left it there. "I get it," he said, quietly. "Good luck with everything." And that was it, the final chapter. I hung up, leaned back in my chair, and took a deep breath. There was no more weight on my shoulders, no more resentment or regret. I had built something of my own, something that couldn't be taken away. And for the first time, I realized it wasn't just about winning or beating anyone. It was about becoming the person I had always known I could be, even when it seemed impossible. Kyle had stolen my business plan, but I had taken back my life. And in doing so, I had proven something far more important than any business success could ever show: that I could rise above anything, no matter how low someone tried to bring me. And now, as I look ahead, I know one thing for certain. No one, no matter who they are, no matter how close they were, can ever take that from me again.